I think the most important predictive things are going to be you as a company deciding when you think the market's going to turn, and then probably 6 months before you think that turn is going to happen, to start hiring those acquisitions people. Because I see within the next couple of years, acquisitions really becoming the big focus again. You may need a full-on acquisitions director. You may need a couple of analysts. You may need some sort of innovative offshore solution for first passes and things like that.
Welcome, everybody. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the dynamic world of multifamily real estate and focusing on the heartbeat of any successful venture, its people. From effective hiring strategies to navigating termination with empathy, we dive deep into the human side of the industry. We unravel the intricacies of the multifamily job market, learn how to navigate tough hiring and firing decisions, and uncover the innovative strategies that are reshaping how companies attract and secure top talent. Today, we are joined with us by none other than Amanda Loveless, Viking Capital's Director of Operations and a hiring expert. So welcome, Amanda.
I'm great. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we kind of dive into today's topic, tell us a little bit about your story. What you're doing before Viking, what your kind of main job functions are at Viking, and then we'll kind of dive into the meat of the conversation.
Absolutely. I've spent a lot of time in the human resources world across multiple different industries. So I've worked in hospitality, I've worked in human services, I've worked in social services, and most recently in the multifamily space. And whereas all the markets are a little different, the most important piece is really understanding your company's culture and how that's going to fit into the people that you bring into the company. And the little intricacies between the different markets kind of work themselves out. But here at Viking, I really do focus mostly on the people. I handle all the human resources functions, and I do all of the hiring. And we've been amazingly successful in bringing in some of the top talent in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always joke around at Viking that, Amanda's done pretty much every job under the sun. So she has a wealth of experience. I mean, at this point, if she told me that she was going to be a NASA scientist, or she has been in the past, I would believe her and believe her full-heartedly. So, I appreciate you kind of taking the time, Amanda, because I know that I feel like you have experience in a lot of different industries, from hospitality. I could list all the jobs, but it'd take a while. So let's just jump in. What are kind of specific skills and qualifications that are in really high demand in kind of this current job market, specifically as it relates to kind of the multifamily industry?
Absolutely. Multifamily is seeing kind of a shift right now in what it is that is attracting talent. And we're really seeing a high demand for expertise within the asset management space and the debt structuring space. There's not a lot of transacting going on right now. So really the main bread and butter is to make sure that the assets you currently have are really, really performing well, and that the debt that you have, you're able to either get really good rates or able to restructure what it is that you maybe got yourself into a couple of years ago. And so there's really a high demand for those top performers in those fields. And really, when you're looking for someone within those, it's more of a kind of a recruitment game and wanting to see you can get someone before the competition does.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially like right now in this time, I feel like operations, asset management are paramount, especially with, transaction volume that died down a little bit. And especially moving into kind of the, I'm not gonna say the transaction kind of machine, but getting backing on that rhythm, that normal cadence of picking up deals pretty regularly. You're gonna want to have kind of the current operations, and especially the debt portion of that really kind of in line before you kind of pick up future assets. So, and that makes sense too, right? There's almost about 2 million delta right now between those that are claiming unemployment and the job openings in the market too. So it's about 2 million looking for positions. Which is, we've seen the same thing on site too. Even our kind of on-site payroll and our on-site staff, we've noticed it's taking a larger budget to retain, top quality staff, which is obviously paramount, especially given the times too. So, what other challenges have you faced in kind of recruiting that top level talent that you talked about?
Well, really, it's a numbers game, and it's really what is it that you're willing to pay for? Because to your point, you can get the top talent out there, but how much can you afford to pay, and how much are you willing to pay? Because people such as asset managers or debt structurers that are really amazing at what they do, they're getting offers from everywhere. So it's a matter of, can we give them a more lucrative offer? And it doesn't always have to be in the actual salary. Maybe we offer better benefits. Maybe we have a better medical program or a 401k program that's super exciting. Or there's other innovative ways, volunteer time or flex time or things like that that really attract that talent to let them show that they are valued to you. And some of those other, some of those other strategies that you want to look at is just being willing to wait for the right person. A lot of times when you need to hire, you kind of feel this stress and this pressure to bring somebody in and get them rolling. But I guarantee you, bringing in the wrong hire is going to be much more costly to you, both in dollar and cents and also in your operations. And if you were to just wait and make sure that you really feel comfortable with the person you're bringing in.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what are your kind of thoughts on hiring for the future in terms of, hey, this is something that we want to be in 3 to 5 years. You should really kind of hire the people now versus kind of the argument that you should really kind of only hire once that need or once that kind of friction presents itself.
I think that's a balancing act. I think there's a point if you're hiring 3 to 5 years down the road, it might be too much too soon. But there is also a predictive element. So yes, the market right now is not great for bringing on new deals, but we're all hearing that come the 2024, definitely 2025, the market's going to tick back up, everything's going to be working again, and you don't want to find yourself caught without a great acquisitions analyst, for example, because all of a sudden they're going to be in high demand and you're going to kind of miss the mark. Whereas if you know, hey, we need that person, maybe I start looking for them in 3 months or 6 months, knowing that come 2025, they're going to be a huge asset to my company. I can beat the market and I can lead the market in salary and income and things like that, so that I can receive that top talent maybe at a cheaper price than someone who waited. So there is a predictive value, but there has to also be looking more than 6 months to a year out can sometimes be detrimental.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's almost like you're sailing a ship, right? And you have your entire crew ready for the stormy seas. You don't want to have, realize you get halfway through your journey, storms kicking up, winds are blowing you from side to side. You guys don't have the right kind of personnel to keep the ship afloat. So 100%. Are there any kind of, unconventional or unique strategies that you're using to really attract that top talent? Because I'd assume that most of the kind of the hiring is done right now on LinkedIn and Indeed and kind of the major platforms, but is something specific that you're using to say, hey, Viking's a little bit different. This is how we're different than there are a lot of other companies out there?
Absolutely. I don't think the places that we're looking are necessarily innovative, because you really are going to get your best talent from like a LinkedIn or we use Select Leaders sometimes because they focus solely on real estate. Indeed, those types of places, those are well known, people are familiar with them, they feel comfortable with them, so they're good places to be. What really is going to set you apart is your interviewing strategy. So before we even talk with people, we put them through a few different stringent tests to make sure that we're really only spending our quality time on people that are quality candidates and that are willing to put in the work and the effort to make themselves aware. So we do a very basic step where they just submit a resume. We don't require like a cover letter or an application or anything. We just take the resume. But from there, we do require them to do some cognitive and aptitude testing, as well as some personality testing. It's a great way to set people apart. If they're not willing to put in the time for that 45-minute test, they may not be worth the time later on down the road. And then as a company, we've set boundaries of who, based on the score of that test, who we're going to look at further and who's already going to be knocked out of the running. So that we really kind of brings the candidate pool down to those people that are truly interested and truly qualified. And then even after they score well on that cognitive exam, we have a list of questions that we send to them via email that we like them to answer. We want to see how much time and energy they're putting into those responses, as well as their ability to provide very good written documentation, because these people are going to be interacting with high net worth individuals and working with, high tech things. And then from there, then we actually start face-to-face interviews. And I think going through that process really kind of brings the cream to the top of the barrel, so to speak, so that you can know for sure that these people are excited and they're interested and they're willing to work. And that's really what sets us apart from those of the others.
Yep. And I love that process too, where it is, hey, first self-selection, who's actually willing to put in the time, the effort to complete kind of the requirements, the hurdles to apply for the job. Then kind of qualification or like an expertise almost selection where it's like, hey, do you actually have the capacity to do it, right? Something we consistently say is, right person, right seat. So there's been instances where it's the right person, right? They fit the company culture, they are in line with the vision of Viking, kind of its growth, but it may not be the right specific seat for them, or kind of the reverse, right? We've had other instances where it's not the right person or not the right seat entirely, right? And it's kind of that process that I think is somewhat like a growing organism too, right? The company and kind of culture adapts and kind of grows over time. It's never stagnant. So at any kind of given time, you're gonna want or need different people. And it's always kind of keeping that pulse on, is this the right person? Is this the right seat for them as well? And even during the interview process, because I know I've interviewed for a few positions for future Viking employees as well. And something I always want to ask them is, what made you apply to Viking? There's a bunch of, to your point, there's a bunch of different companies and cultures and people and organizations they could have joined. What specifically made them attracted to Viking? That can also kind of tell you, hey, have they done their research into who we are as a culture, what our goals are, even what our industry is, right? So it's all very important. We've
Yeah.
talked, yeah, go for it.
Well, just one last thing to kind of piggyback off that. In the actual interview process, multiple interviews is important. You want to do just a basic introductory interview to make sure that they do have the skills that they claim to have, but you also want to make sure that you do cultural fit interviews and that those interviews are with multiple members of the team, because different people are going to have different perspectives and they're going to see things that maybe that initial interview didn't see. So I highly recommend doing multiple interviews and not just basing it off your first impression interview.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And here's a question for you. There are investors out there that might not be at kind of the scale that Viking is, right? They might not have 10 plus employee payroll, and kind of that whole organizational structure. What would be kind of the first few hires for, let's say, just an investor? They might be on the active side, might be on the passive side, to really kind of start their business. Is it an asset manager? Is it a marketer? Is it a virtual assistant? Kind of what would be the first people that they should bring on board?
Yeah, I think whether you're either on the active or passive side, I think your most important first hire is going to be either a virtual assistant or an executive assistant, someone that's really just going to kind of be that glue for you. As an investor, you have multiple different things that you're involved in. You have other jobs, you have other investments, you have other things going on, and you may not always be in touch and on top of everything that's going on with your particular investment. And so you want someone that can do kind of those things. They can do your scheduling for you. They can make sure that appointments are met and made and all those different things, that you are where you need to be so that you can utilize your time to the best of your ability. And then once that takes effect and you're growing, you're really looking at that point, depending on the size of your business, either on the acquisition side or the asset management side. If you're looking to acquire your first deal, you don't need an asset manager yet. You need an acquisitions guy. You need someone that knows how to find deals, who understands the pipeline, who can get that ball rolling and who can take that off your plate as well, so that you're really spending your time, dealing with the people that are going to bring you money. Or if you're someone that already has maybe a couple of deals under your belt and you're looking to move on, maybe the asset manager is the way to go so that you can kind of take that off your plate and you can worry about what's coming new. But definitely those would be the first kind of top three that you're looking for.
Yep. Fully agree. Fully agree. It's all about kind of covering your blind spots too, right? Because it takes you a lot less time and probably a lot more money, if you were to kind of try and find or even learn the skill set yourself, rather than find the right person who already has that skill set, has years of experience, and kind of fill those gaps for you, right? I think it's important to kind of take this conversation in two different ways, right? We've talked about hiring people. We've talked about, building company culture, what it means to, have a culture. Let's talk a little bit about termination, which I feel like is kind of the elephant in the room that no one really talks about when they talk about hiring, but part of keeping an organization and culture strong is getting the right people in the door, but then also, having people that don't fit, expect the company, but also leave on kind of good blood, right? So how do you balance the need for termination with empathy while also ensuring, business's best interests are protected?
Absolutely. I think this is something that you want to start evaluating on day one. You want to make sure that the person that comes in the door is the same person that you met in an interview. And you want to kind of keep close tabs on that because it's more costly and more detrimental the longer that you wait. With that being said, though, you don't want to blindside someone. To your point, you want this to be as empathetic of a situation as possible for everybody involved. So documentation really is the key, and being very fact-based, being, let's say that their goal was to hire, maybe you brought in a raiser and they were supposed to raise $10 million for your deal and they didn't meet that goal. That's a very clear cut set of expectations that weren't met. And when those expectations aren't met, it's important very early on to have candid, documented conversations saying, this is what happened, this is where we're looking at, and then offering support for, how can we help? How can we make this better? Because maybe they just had a little rough start. Happens with all the best of us. But you also want to make sure that they're aware that this is not acceptable. And so you want that, we call it progressive discipline, so that you continuously are having a conversation so that if you have to come to that point that you part ways, they're not surprised. They've had enough conversations to know that this may be an alternative. And with that empathy in mind, you want to make sure, they need a livelihood. Everyone needs to have a job. So our goal is never to make it so that they don't work somewhere else. It's just to make it so that they're no longer with us. But if people call for reference checks, if people are looking, you always want to be as fair, as honest as possible. And if that means that you withhold some information because you don't want to put a bad light on somebody, then that's what you do. Legally, you're only required to say yes or no, they worked here and this was their position. Sometimes that's the best way to go, because the last thing you want is sort of a deformation of character where they can't provide work somewhere else, because we do want them to move on and be happy, and we want to make that relationship as clean cut and amicable as possible.
Yep. And to your point too, right? If they are made aware of it and you've had multiple discussions before, it also gives them the opportunity to, course correct and kind of get back on track as well. It's not as if they're kind of blindsided, out of left field and say, I have no idea this is even going on. They've had those conversations along, multiple steps of the way too.
Absolutely.
So, we talked a little bit about hiring, we talked a little about firing, but how do you know when somebody isn't that right culture fit, right? What, in your experience, what role does culture fit play in the hiring process? Is it something that you mentioned on the front end, throughout the process? And then kind of stacking on that, we always have this kind of phrase, right? Slow to hire, fast to fire. What do the timelines look, for the hiring process and also for the firing process as well?
Yeah, absolutely. For small companies, culture is everything, because everything is built on that culture and reputation that you want to provide to the world so that you can grow. So the way that we handle things is culture is something that is decided from the get-go. As a company, we have what we call our core values, these 5 ideas that we feel that every person should embody. And from day one, when we put a job description together, those core values are already in that job description. So the goal being that someone who's applying for the job has read those from the get-go and says, hey, I think I meet these. And then they are discussed on every interview. And it's something that each person that's doing the interviewing is kind of monitoring and saying, hey, I feel like they fit these, or maybe they're missing one of these, and maybe we should continue to look. Because it's very obvious from the first day, those of us that have worked in this company, most of us have been here, Nathan and I have been here about 3 years, Judah's been here 4. We spent a lot of time together. We understand how each other works, how the company works, and what those expectations are. And yes, someone new coming into the door may not know the little nuances, but they should be able to very quickly pick up, and the communication style is similar, and the way that things are expressed are similar. And you're going to notice very quickly when someone can't meet those little nuances, because you feel the off cadence with either their work style or the way that they submit that work. And so to your point, hire slow, fire fast. When you're hiring, you want to expect somewhere between 2 to 4 months of a process of you to hire. Maybe quicker than that, maybe longer than that, but that's about the average, because that's going to give you a really good pool of candidates, and it's going to let you see a few people. A resume is just a piece of paper. It doesn't tell me if that person is bubbly. It doesn't tell me if that person is good with articulating their thoughts. It doesn't tell me those things. An interview is going to tell me that. And then maybe I interview 15 people, and of those 15 people, this person feels most like a Viking person because they are resourceful. They've mentioned that in many of the different things that they've done at past jobs, or they're willing to help people first. They've mentioned before that the first thing they do is ask others to help. And so you want to make sure that that's just embedded in everything that you do. And that first 90 days that someone is then hired is extremely important. And you want to make sure that you, especially the first couple months, you're having maybe even weekly check-ins with them to make sure that they feel comfortable in the environment and that you feel comfortable with them and that they have the tools necessary to do the job.
Yep. It's part of that. Find the right person in the right seat. The right seat's easier to find, right? It's, hey, do you have the job qualifications? Do you have the experience? Do you understand what the job duties entail? Find the right person, I feel like, is a lot harder because it's adapting a complete stranger, almost somebody that you see on paper, and then trying to gauge whether they fit in with the company culture that you built and are building for the future as well.
Absolutely. And that's something for people that are applying to keep in mind, is that if you get rejected from a job, it's not necessarily because you don't have the qualifications to do it. It may very well be a cultural fit. And in all reality, that should be a gratitude to you, because it's not going to do you any well either coming into a company that you don't fit in, because you're not going to feel as if you can perform to your utmost either.
Yep. Yeah, I love that point. Great point. So beyond kind of the traditional team building activities, people think about culture, think about, company holidays and people like high-fiving and hugging kind of in the office. What kind of additional steps do you or do companies that you've worked for in the past kind of utilize to really foster that positive cultural environment, but also a positive just work environment in general?
Absolutely. And with a remote environment, this is extremely important because you never want to make someone feel that they are kind of alone on an island because they are not in an office every day with people. And that can be done in multiple different ways. Zoom, Slack, text messages are all really important things that can be done on a daily basis and should be done on a daily basis. Doesn't need to be long or drawn out. 5-10 minutes with just that interaction to make sure that they know that you exist, they know what's going on, you know that they know what's going on is super important. And then for me, I think one of the biggest things that we do, like we love to celebrate people's kind of their birthdays and their anniversaries. So every year, everybody gets a birthday gift and an anniversary gift, and it is personalized for them, and it goes to them at home so that they know that they're being thought of. It's not a big expense for the employer, but it makes a big impact for the employee because they feel valued and they feel important. And you want them to feel that way because the more valued that they feel, the more they're going to provide to the company. And then, especially if you're in a remote environment, it's important with your budget to make sure that you make an opportunity for everybody to meet in person at least once a year. Doesn't need to be some big brouhaha, but even if you're just meeting and you're spending time having a meal, it's really going to make that important, and people are going to look forward to it. They're going to be excited for it. But you can do other things, like you can do virtual happy hours, you can do bingo, all these different things that make people feel important and valued, and your culture is really going to determine what that is for you.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that one of the in-person meetings are huge, right? But doing non-work related activities with your work family, if you will, or your work team, I think is also super important. Like even that team dinner, even though we're all together and we're all there meeting for the purpose of the company and to, work on the company, it's also important to kind of chit chat, see what people are doing in their lives, and really kind of have that personal connection outside of work. I think that also helps really, really build the culture as well. Absolutely.
And especially in a remote environment, when you're having meetings all the time, I think it's super important and necessary that you take the first 5-ish minutes of that meeting to not talk about work. People want to feel like they're valued and important on a value that doesn't have to do with work. You're asking about their spouse, their kids, their hobbies, their whatever, just to kind of build that camaraderie. And then you can go in and do the work things. But if you're not spending those precious minutes, you're losing something. You don't get those water cooler experiences that you have in person.
Yep. And even to your point too, right? Even communicating on Slack, we have a Slack channel. It's just kind of this random Slack channel for any kind of celebration, whether it's your kids did really well at school or your spouse did phenomenal at their kind of sports event that they went to, right? Just those kind of those celebrations, almost those mini celebrations of the people part of the company, I think are huge. I mean, we do the same thing on kind of all of our Monday meetings. We'll have kind of a celebration. Hey, you know, team, give us feedback. Who here on your team is doing phenomenal? Who's excelling at those core values? Who really went above and beyond? And to really not only have that feedback presented on kind of the leadership level, but also have that feedback go back to that individual and say, hey, you did a really phenomenal job here. You really kind of went above and beyond. This is where you had, help first mindset, or really kind of resourceful, or saying, or just giving them feedback that you not only met kind of company culture, but you are one of the reasons that it's a living, breathing kind of entity itself. So I think that's a perfect transition to our kind of next point, is that virtual world is something that I don't think that a lot of us have really ever experienced, right? I mean, there was always these remote jobs that existed, but for the majority of us, is very much kind of a in-person, at the office kind of job. What kind of technological advancements, Zoom, many other things have really kind of influenced the hiring and firing strategies that you're currently using?
Absolutely. I think we can definitely thank COVID for the remote work that we live in today. To your point, there were remote jobs prior to COVID. I worked them myself before that time. But it was still very much the norm that you drove to an office, you had set hours, this was your cubicle, those were the expectations, and the rest of your life kind of revolved around that. COVID required us to make these innovative choices and these decisions. And from a human resources perspective, it created us wonderful opportunities to provide a world that didn't really exist before. And it did really become a collaboration with our IT departments and our technology, because most jobs, if we're going to be 100% honest, can be done at home. There are very few jobs that require you to actually be there. I mean, yes, doctors, things like that, you have to actually be in person, but we found ways around that as well. I mean, telehealth is becoming extremely popular. But it's really just a matter of kind of changing the paradigm, because the biggest feedback that we received from management and above was that they felt that they lost some of that control over their subordinates, because they couldn't look out on the floor and see them and see what they were doing. And so it was coming up with collaborative ways to satisfy both the supervisor and also make the employee feel empowered as well. And so, Zoom is big, Teams are big, Slack is big. People have reorganized their budgets to make room for these things. They provided company phones, cell phones, all the different things. They provided companies, depending on the size, have had IT people come to people's homes and get them completely set up, because some people aren't as technology savvy as how do I set up my own stuff at home. And being able to provide everybody with a laptop or a computer or whatever the case may be, and really understanding that if you're willing to give people flex time, you're actually getting much more out of them. The requirement these days for your basic Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job is kind of outdated, and people that are still requiring that are having a harder time hiring, because we realize that work-life balance is so important. People have families, they have kids, they have doctor's appointments, they have life that still happens in the middle of the day. So if you allow that flex time and work more towards a results-driven society of, as long as you get your work done by your timeline, go and do, you are going to attract some of the best people, because some of the best workers out there have personal situations that require that they can't really work that 9 to 5, but you give them that flexibility, they will meet your timeline, and you will get an excellent employee.
Yep. Yeah. You empower them, right? You make them happy, and you give them to say, hey, this is the project that needs to get done. This is kind of the time it needs to get done in, but how and when you get it actually done, it's up to you, as long as it's done before the actual deadline, right? And that gives them a sense of empowerment to really kind of shape their, as I said, that work-life balance to their benefit in terms of they have the energy, they have the focus, they have the desire to like come to work and really excel, while also, having that kind of balance part of that work-life balance where they can enjoy life. They don't, have to be stuck in office. They can go out for a walk midday if that's they need it for their kind of mental health, right?
Absolutely.
Can you share kind of a personal success story of like a particularly effective hire? Could be a multifamily, could be, different industry.
Absolutely. We here at Viking, we were looking to hire an asset manager. Uh, we had an asset manager who was fantastic, and we were very grateful to him. Uh, his life situation changed, and he moved on to a different job. And we wished him all the best, and he's doing really well. But it left us needing an asset manager at a time where we kind of felt that pressure that we really need to bring someone in. But as a company, we had a very open and honest conversation. We need to take the time to find the right person and be willing to just just kind of make it through until we get there. But I think what made that hire so successful was kind of three major points. One, like I already said, we were willing to wait for the right person. And two, we had full company buy-in on exactly what we wanted this person to accomplish to be successful. So it wasn't just a very broad statement of they're going to oversee our assets and make them profitable. It was very much a line item, list by list of these are the things that they need to accomplish to be successful. And then taking those items and creating a very strong job description from it. And then the third thing that was very successful was we stuck to that very stringent hiring process of the many steps of the cognitive exam and the personality exam and the very many the poor man had a lot of interviews, but because he was willing to do so, we were able to see who he was, what he could bring to the table, and we all got a feeling for personality wise and cultural wise, is this someone that we want to be sitting across the table from? And he has been amazingly successful, and our properties have really blossomed under him because he has the buy-in and we have the buy-in that he is the right person in the right seat.
Yep. Yeah, fully agree. Fully agree. And find that right person can take a little bit of time, as you said, right? Kind of that patience game, but it's a lot more beneficial to wait and find the right person than to quickly hire somebody and find out that they're not the right person or they're not in the right seat, right? Something that we continuously focus on even prior to that hire was putting function over people when it came to finding kind of the next hire, right? And so saying, hey, I know this great person that I know through X, Y, and Z. We used to work together. I think they'd be a great addition to the company, right? That's putting the person before the function. But if you say, hey, looking at the company as a whole, looking at the structure and where our goals are in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, what function do we need to fill? What position do we need to fill? And then find the right people that met that function. I think it's a much more efficient, much more effective way than putting kind of people ahead of that function, even if you do put people first.
Absolutely. There's actually just a recent study that came out in the human resources world that said that quantitatively speaking, the wrong hire can cost you 300% of that person's salary, between the cost of salary and the cost of hiring and all the things in between. When you think about it in those terms, it's worth an extra couple, 3-4 weeks to wait than to pay that extra money.
Well, it sounds about right? It sounds like about 3 years or so to kind of undo a bad hire sounds about right. You probably take that first year kind of figuring out that they're probably not the right fit, right? Probably being a bit too slow to fire. And the next year, 2 years kind of cleaning up, kind of reorganizing, restructuring back to where things quote unquote should have been in the first place. 100%. So, given the evolving landscape, what predictions or insights do you have kind of for the future of hiring?
Absolutely, especially in particular with the multifamily space. Multifamily is cyclical. We've seen that now. We're in a different cycle now than we were 2-3 years ago, where hiring was much different. I think the most important predictive things are going to be you as a company deciding when you think the market's going to turn, and then probably 6 months before you think that turn is going to happen, to start hiring those acquisitions people. Because I see within the next couple of years, acquisitions really becoming the big focus again. You may need a full-on acquisitions director. You may need a couple of analysts. You may need some sort of innovative offshore solution for first passes and things like that. But definitely you as a company need to decide based on all the economic stuff that's out there, what you think that market turn is going to be like. Start 6 months earlier, bring on your new hire so that you have the time to hire and the time to train when things aren't crazy. And then they can just hit the ground running and really show you what they're worth. I think that's going to be huge. And I think we haven't really touched on it, but the marketing and IR side of things is also going to be really big. You really want someone that understands multifamily marketing and how that works and how those pieces work, and then someone that really knows how to raise capital so that when people have disposable income again, you have someone that can fight for those people and bring them to your tribe versus someone else's.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, man. It was a wealth of kind of knowledge, and given your wealth of experience, I'm not surprised, but it's always kind of a great time to hop on and call and kind of discuss, the current lay of the land for hiring, right? It's been kind of a tough time to find the right people and, especially get them the right seats. But I mean, kudos to you. You've done a phenomenal job at Viking to really kind of build a company culture and to build a team that I think is really kind of poised well for the future. And is kind of all on the same line in terms of our cadence and our kind of goals for where we want Viking to be in, 5-10 years from now. So any last kind of words of wisdom, Amanda?
I'm going to go back to hire slow and fire quick. Be willing to put in the time and effort on the front end to find the right person, and then make sure that you closely monitor so that that your culture can survive and that you can have a successful company.
Absolutely. And one thing that wasn't mentioned was, people are your greatest asset. So pour into them, right? Pour into them during the job interviews, pour into them during, while they're with the company, pour with them, on the way out. You really want to, as I said, it's their livelihood, and it's kind of, as business owners and as kind of a team, it's kind of all of our duties and our responsibilities to care for each other, regardless of whether we're with the company, with a different company, transitioning in, transitioning out, because it's always kind of this fluid kind of dynamic. And you want to really, if you're going to have a company culture that stays afloat, it comes down to the people, right? It really comes down to the people at the end of the day. So awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe or a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.